Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Zero Distortion. Politics. Not easy to talk about these days, especially when it's with a friend, a colleague, or a family member who may not necessarily see the world the same way you do. So, what happens? Do we avoid the topic altogether? Do we have that conversation and just get pissed off? Or do we try something a little bit harder, like actually listening, trying to understand where someone else is coming from, and maybe even sharing our own views without turning it into a real war? Well, that's what we're going to try to do today. Greg Heller. He is someone I've known for a long time, not just in business where met, where he's always been reliable, knowledgeable, and ethical, but he's someone I also call a friend. And while we may not always agree on politics, we've always had honest conversations rooted in mutual respect. So Craig, he calls himself a conservative Democrat. We're going to get into that and what that means to him and kind of compare it to some of his skepticism of the system in general and why he's drawn to voices that maybe challenge the status quo. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. What's broken, where he's coming from, and where he thinks we're headed. So no shouting, hopefully, no spin, just a real conversation between two people who don't need to actually agree to have a really damn good talk. So let's get into it. Craig, welcome to Zero Distortion. It's so good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Russ. Really look forward to a conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise. And just for folks who don't know who you are, can you give us a quick intro into what you do, where you're from, just kind of the elevator pitch of who Craig Heller is?
Okay, so I am a born and raised Pittsburgh person that moved to Indiana approximately 20 years ago. Um, I am a military veteran, was a Army medic for several years. Been in
Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure. And then married with two kids, both in school on their way to college, hopefully in a few years. I worked in industrial distribution. Obviously, that's where you and I met several years ago. So
Yeah.
it's been 30 plus years after the military. So um, doing well. And that's where I am.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, we're going to talk some politics, right? And as I mentioned in the opening, um, it's so hard to discuss right now politics because it's either you're on this side or on this side, and there just doesn't seem to be that respect between the parties these days, and it's kind of fallen into just everyday life, which I think is very unfortunate. Um, so we're going to chat about that. I think you and I can have these conversations. But we probably align on a lot of things, as we were talking earlier, and maybe there's some things we don't align on. And hey, that's okay, and we can talk about it. So let's start with you feel that you're I'll say, I think the term you used was conservative Democrat. So
Right.
what does that mean? Whenever you say I'm a conservative Democrat, what does that mean? Because I think the parties have kind of changed and they moved here and there. So to you today in 2025, what does a conservative Democrat represent to you?
So it's more middle of the road on some of the social issues like abortion, same sex marriage, tax cuts to the middle class instead of the upper class, strict control on the federal budget, military action being only allowed through congressional approvals, avoiding wars by strength and open communications. And what I believe is what we see today from the Democratic Party is different than where it was in the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s. So when I say it's more of a traditional Democrat, not today's Democrat. Does that make
So
sense?
yeah, no, it does. Let me dig in a little bit. So in today's Democratic Party, you feel is too liberal or has gone too far to the left? Is that kind of your thought as far as compared to
Yeah.
where the Democratic Party was 20 years ago?
Like if you go back, immigration was something that in border control that the Democrats really, really were strong with. They believed in a strong border. That's not the case in the last administration. And there's this belief that, hey, they need to open the borders up. If you go back to like 1987 with Ronald Reagan, where he passed, where I think it was like 2 or 3 million illegal immigrants got amnesty. And it that was a Republican thing. And it was for political purposes. It wasn't for doing the right thing. The idea was, hey, if I pass this, I will get more Republican votes. I just increased the Republican number of people that will vote Republican. And it actually backfired. And I feel that what our last administration did that to drive more of the Democrat population. And just getting back, it was, hey, we have a legal process. And most Democratic politicians have a legal background. First, most Republicans have more of a business background. And so the Democrats were more law and order. And so there was a process. Let's follow the process. It should be black and white. And I feel our party has fallen away from that. It has gone, in some cases, off the rails to where, and this goes for all of our government, there's like no accountability anymore. You make a major mistake, like whether it's getting caught doing something you shouldn't do, and there's video, and or there's clear evidence, it is not being held accountable. And my feeling is, and a lot of people that I am friends with and we talk politics have the same feeling that if they hold that politician accountable, it opens up for an investigation into them. If you heard most recently, there's a push to do an investigation into Nancy Pelosi and her stock trades.
Yep. Yep.
And if there's nothing to hide, you have no worries.
Right.
Why are so many Republicans voting against it?
Yeah.
The idea is if we do it to Nancy, then they can come and do it to me.
Right.
So that's what it gives the appearance. We have a lack of transparency within our government and a lack of accountability.
Yeah.
So that's where I feel we have major issues within the Democratic Party, but it also bleeds right over to the Republicans as well.
Yeah, I think you are exactly right. It's both parties. They're both, especially when you're talking about that type of situation. I think they've all kind of got dirty fingers there, right? I'm not saying
Right.
every single. I'm just saying both parties have
Right.
things that they don't want out in the open. And I think you made a really good point of they don't want to point to this person on the other side of the aisle because there may be a lot more pointing back at that person later.
Yeah. And the best way to fix it, in what I believe, is term limits.
I think that's a great idea.
So
Yes.
if we get new people, fresh people in, that you'll start breaking some of that. Hey, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. And we'll start having a little more trust with our government. I mean, our government, the senators and representatives, it was never designed to be a profession. It was originally designed to be your civic duty. Yeah, you had a regular job or business, and then you did your civic duty by coming in to Congress and voting on laws and bringing everything. And they didn't even get paid. They had a per diem only. And along the lines, we started paying our senators and representatives to help prevent corruption.
Yeah.
But instead, it just become worse and worse. When we have the people that represent us have never sat or stood in our shoes or in our seat. They've been a politician all their life. Then you start feeling that, do they really know what I'm going through? They can say it in their ivory tower. They think they understand my problems, but they've never been in my shoes. They don't have to. You want a healthcare system for us? Then be on the same healthcare system that you're passing. But that's not the case.
That's not the case. I think of like a Chuck Grassley, who, and it could be anybody. Biden, he was a career politician too, right? So you could point to a Biden, you can point to a Chuck Grassley, just for examples on both sides of the aisle. And career people, I mean, they were in there, they've been in there for a long time. Grassley's still in there. And I think I don't know if he's still going to run, next time or not, but he can't relate to what I'm going to say his constituents live every day. I think that's a great point.
It was, a lot of people are shocked when they say this, the people that know me. That's why I voted for Obama in his first term. He was an outsider. He was going to change things. He was going to, as Trump says, drain the swamp, but he put it in different terms. You got to break the machine and get it fixed. My feeling is he initially tried, didn't work, and I think he just continued with it, and I think he got sucked into it. So
it's almost like a black hole, right? You think you're going to go in and light it up and expose and change. And that's something I've heard is it's not that simple. Until you get in there, it's not that easy to do. It's great talking points, but can you really do that? I don't know. I don't know that one person, even if it's the president, can go in there and do that. Now, we've got changes today, right? It's pretty much one person that's responsible for all of it, but kind of different situation.
Different situation from what you see. I see as, and I don't agree with all of it, but I see what President Trump is doing. It's a good thing. He's breaking things, and both sides are upset. And if both sides are upset, he's probably doing things they don't want to happen. And they don't want to happen for their personal reasons, not for the good of the country. I think the things that he is doing, he is breaking the mold and trying to break the machine. And hopefully the next person that's in after him, Republican or Democrat, can continue so that we don't do the same things and have the same type of political system that we continue having and have had for the last, I would say, going back to probably ended started after Jimmy Carter. There was a whole process,
So when you say both sides are upset, obviously the Democrats are pretty upset with what's happening with Trump, and there's a whole list of things, right? It's not just one issue. It's kind of across the board. But what what Republicans are upset with what he's doing. Do you have any examples of that? Because I don't see a whole lot of that, but I'd love to hear if they are.
I see it where you have enough that are voting against what he is pushing, instead of it being all one party going and voting all Republican. We don't see that. We typically see all Democrat, except for one that he isn't looked at as someone that is a great senator, but he is breaking and exposing the flaws in the Democratic Party. And that's the senator from Pittsburgh, or from Pennsylvania, Fetterman.
Fetterman?
Yeah. He calls it out. He has said, hey, some of the things that Trump is doing is right. We should be doing that. And that is
Yeah.
right from the Democratic Party. He is by himself on most policies.
Yeah, and I guess he's got some issues, I guess, that I've heard about. But I hear what you're saying. He's breaking from the Democrats. But what about, you mentioned the people on both sides of the party? So what Republicans are breaking from what Trump's wanting to do? I mean, it doesn't show up in the votes, really.
I'd have to specifically look it up, but I see where these are the list of the Republicans that voted against.
You got a Thomas Massey, right, from Kentucky. So that's one. You got a Rand Paul in the Senate, who every once in a while he'll counter, but
once in a while he will. Trying to think of the other Southern Republican that was over in the Ukraine most recently.
I'd say for the most part, I don't know the numbers, but I could come up with two that every so often would break with what Trump wants so far this second term. Pretty much everything else is going on with the way that Trump wants. They're voting how he wants. They're confirming folks that he says he wants in.
There was concessions made in the big beautiful bill, as you call the big ugly bill. There was concessions made that were not part of what Trump wanted. And the Republicans made those concessions. In some cases, they were the ones that pushed for the concession, where they didn't want everything that Trump was pushing. So,
and I believe you, but I don't know what that would, I don't know what those are.
Well, one I believe was around the federal tax stamp on, like today, you have to go through a longer process to get a suppressor or a short barrel rifle. And they were trying to get it through to where it would be just like buying a rifle or a gun, a pistol every day. It's a longer process. And there was a tax stamp for the $250 for a suppressor. They got that removed, but not the part that you have to go through this long process of background check and everything like that. It takes much longer than walking in and being able to buy a regular rifle or pistol. That was just one example that always stood out. There were some Republicans that voted against it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's one. I guess the other side of that is, this could be a long conversation, but whenever you're talking about the Medicaid, the SNAP, all of those kind of things, that there were folks that on the Republican side that said, no, I won't vote for that. And they turned around and voted for it. So push came to shove. I mean, they fell in line.
But doesn't that make you wonder why? Like, there's no transparency.
I don't wonder why. I think I know. I've got a theory, but yeah, what do you think?
They got some pork put in for their steak, so they had something to go back and say, "Hey, I got this for,"
like Alaska, like when she voted for it. Yeah, no, that's true.
We don't. No bill passes on its own merits. Like there isn't a bill unless it's an executive order. No bill passes without all this stuff added in. So it's supposed to be 5 million or $50 million for something, and then there's 20 million added in for other things that have nothing to do with that bill, that are essentially bribes for that senator to vote for it so he can bring it back to his state.
So
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah, no, that makes
the
sense.
swamp. That's part of the swamp that we talk about.
So with the party in power now with the Republicans, I mean, they're the ones that are taking the bribes that you're talking about and falling in line, it seems.
Democrats do the same thing.
No, I don't
Yeah.
disagree. I don't disagree. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's at another level as far as what's happening right now with I'll say some corruption. You had mentioned corruption before. I'd like to hear and understand a little bit more about that because
Yeah.
can you speak on that? Because tell
Yeah.
me if I'm understanding this right. Is one of your big issues with the current Democratic Party, or maybe in general, is the corruption?
It's with our government in overall. And
Okay.
it's not with, and I don't believe that it's with everybody, but there is from low level, like the people that work for us at a local government level should be hired and promoted based off of performance and capabilities. That doesn't happen. There's a lot. And listen, for me personally, I grew up in a strong Democratic family. Mother and father were part of the Democratic Party. They were elected committee man and committee woman at certain times. And my mother worked for the county um, in the courthouse. She got her job because of her. It was, hey, you're helping out with the Democratic Party. We're all Democrats. Top of the list. You get hired. And people that worked for her too also got hired. Not everybody, but I got my summer job. I was connected to my parents. So I wanted to work in the local county park. And when I got there, oh, hey, I know you. Hey, what part of the park do you want to work in? And listen, back then, as a young guy, didn't think anything. I'm like, hey, this is great. Parents know people. But when you think back on it, and if it happens at that level, and you know it only increases as you go up within the government. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, one that comes to mind. So you're saying it was kind of who you know,
it
and
was who you know, not your capabilities or your qualifications.
okay. Eh, do you think we have that right now in the federal government?
Uh, it absolutely happens today of who you know
So you
and who you are.
okay? No, I'll buy that. I think there's some prime examples that we could point to.
We need to reduce our government. We don't have problem with the amount of revenue or taxes they're bringing in. We have a spending issue. And it is a very heavy, bloated government. I mean, Obama went through in his first term. I think what did he lay off? 2 to 3 million people?
I maybe, yeah, I don't know.
It was when I read it, I was in shock because I didn't remember back then that, and he said the exact same thing. Our government's inefficient, and he reduced our government. And it's not talked about because it was an okay thing by the Democrats. The Republicans were upset at the time.
Yeah.
And we have a government that has gotten so big and starting to get beyond what they were designed initially to do for us. We have too many departments, too many three-letter departments out there that they overlap and actually cause conflict between each other, like where one's working on something and the other one is, they don't communicate. And when we really could reduce down our government dramatically to do what they're supposed to do. And and as you know, the inefficiency of our government, we don't look to get rid of that. And a prime example of that is if you look at, and hats off to, it was President Obama who pushed and said, hey, we need to rely less on NASA and let the private sector do more of it. And look where SpaceX is. If we would have had it just with NASA, they would be nowhere close to where what SpaceX has done or Blue Origin. Blue Origin's way far behind SpaceX. The private sector can drive down so much of our federal government spending in inefficiencies.
I agree with you. I think the private sector definitely has a role to play, and that competitiveness, and in private sector, it's done a different way. You set a budget and you have to live by that budget. There's
Right.
P&Ls and all those kind of things. Totally
Well,
get it.
there isn't all of that. And that's where we need to start going to, where there is, this is your bid, that's your price. We still have a lot of our government's contracts that it is a cost plus. And the contractors go and, hey, we're going to be over budget. Okay,
Yeah.
here's more money, because the agreement is it's cost plus. There's no incentive for them to stay under budget.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that could be reined in. That gets into project management, but with the government bloat, which I think is valid, that's what Doge was supposed to go and take care of, right? I mean, that was one where Musk said he thought he could save $2 trillion. And then he came back once he was getting started and said, well, maybe it's 1 trillion. Um, I don't know what the number is. I haven't looked at it for a while, but the last I saw, it was like 150 billion. And a lot of that was duplicated, where one number I said was it might be 50 billion that Doge is saved out of the national budget. And a big part of that was reducing people, which, okay, maybe that makes sense. But the other piece that really did make sense are those like USAID and that soft power that is no longer around. So Doge could have, it made sense. I heard about it. I was like, oh, okay, that's something, but it really didn't work. And that was a guy from the private sector coming in there that just seemed to cost more money than what they were maybe saving.
I think it's a misperception on the savings. We eliminated from the future spending what we were already spending. What he saved was what he saved immediately. Like, we eliminated USAID. That's going to save into our budget. The problem is, I don't believe we voted to keep it out, all that spending for future, to remove it permanently. And that's where the big mess was. Like having all these programs of in different countries where we were spending 30, $40 million, or he was going to a NGO. And the other part that I think we missed is there was no investigations. There was a lot of corruption with USAID, with the NGOs. 30 million, 50 million going here, but how much of it actually went to what the project actually was and who actually got the money. Yeah.
I'm with you there. If there's corruption, if there's 50 million that's supposed to go to this cause, but it's actually something corrupt and there's some issue there, absolutely that needs to be taken care
Yes,
of.
it never happens. It never.
Yeah, why didn't they
happens.
do that instead? Instead, they cut everything.
They don't. There's no transparency. There's no accountability. Listen, think about what happened with the Clintons and the whole Haiti funds. And it was proven all the money that was stolen out of there. Nobody was held accountable.
Yeah, so wouldn't that make sense to actually check that stuff out? Or is it better to let's cut down all the soft power and just eliminate USAID as an example?
But then, listen, it stops it, but it doesn't stop the people from thinking that I'll find another way of getting $30 to $50 million, and we'll find another way of doing it. They're not chasing down where the money went. If you did that with your company and you found that money was used illegally or unethically, you dig down and you fire that person, or they get.
Wasn't that what Doge was supposed to do, though? I think we're saying the same thing. Let's find where this is and eliminate it, but they didn't go in with a scalpel or actually do some investigation. From what I'm understanding, they just started hatcheting things, and USAID being one.
And I think Musk kept saying, "Hey, we need to track this money," but he wasn't the one. He was supposed to just find it, to eliminate it, not to do the investigation. And I think that's where I put blame on the Trump administration for not chasing it down. Again, I think that there would have been a lot of our Congress pushing back or trying to stop it because of what it could have exposed.
Well, and let me ask you about that. But one point that I saw an article, and I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was like almost equal to what they thought they had saved annually with Doge, that 150 million, if that was the number. Let's just say it is, for argument's sake. But the Trump administration had already gone over 150 billion compared to the Biden administration, same point last year. So it's like, all right, we saved 150 billion a year, but we're on pace to have another 600 billion spent. So we're, we're 450 billion in the hole.
It gets worse every administration. If you go back to Bush 2, and you keep going, our spending kept going up. Everyone kept talking. The Republicans at certain point saying, "Hey, we have to reduce our spending. Our deficit's so high. We need to run a budget," and they would fight any ceiling limit increased. Everyone kept spending more and more money, including Trump. Now, Trump's plan could be that in the end, he'll get it all fixed through the tariffs and tax reduction and things like that, and helping increase our domestic manufacturing capabilities. Maybe at the end, it becomes that we run within a budget. Right now, I don't see it.
What's your thought on tariffs? I mean, we're recording this. It's the last day of July. Tomorrow, August 1st, is supposed to be the day that these tariffs are in effect. They're not kicking the can. I say that when I understand I saw an article that he's already kind of backed that off of Mexico. He's given another 90 days for Mexico. Now, it's just one country, and there's several of them out there. But what's your take on the tariffs? Do you think that makes sense? Or let me ask you this. Do you realize, I'm sure you do, these tariffs that's going to cost the consumers, right?
It is. to a certain extent. There is going to be, for some products, it's going to impact the consumer. I think these tariffs, the idea of these tariffs, most of them are long, like should have been implemented decades ago. If you go back to when, and you and I were young kids, when our steel industry was hurting, because what was happening? Japan was dumping their steel in here, and it was all being subsidized by the Japanese government. And we got through it. And then I remember during my times with industrial Class C components, fasteners, and other things, where when we bought them from China, China had a 16% subsidy for all the fastener companies that exported fasteners. So the government was saying, hey, we're going to help you sell more fasteners and export it. Well, meanwhile, any fasteners that came from China into Canada, they had like a 50 or 60% tariff on it. The U.S. government did nothing. And so I saw
Canada had tariffs or still has tariffs on.
They did back then. I don't know
back
if they
then.
still
Okay.
But they had a tariff for any fastener that we would ship into Canada that was made in China. So
okay,
they were protecting their local manufacturing. Yeah, it costs more for, you want to buy these fasteners and they're made in China. It cost you more, but it got their country to buy more, protect their manufacturers.
That's protecting their manufacturers, their national manufacturers in Canada. Yeah,
we have such strong trade deficits. These tariffs, it's painful now, but the idea is to build up to bring these products back home. And we're already seeing some of it. I mean, you saw like years ago, Toyota built a plant right north of where you grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fantastic. Instead of having them manufactured overseas, we need more manufacturing, not just for as U.S. citizens to have more blue collar jobs that can help them pay their bills and have a good lifestyle, but also it's for national security. If we don't have them, and you saw it, during COVID, we were getting everything from China. We couldn't get chips. You couldn't get switchgear. Switchgear was so long because of the chips. You couldn't. I remember up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, there were parking lots away from the GM plant everywhere because there was a chip that they were waiting for. And they had the GM and Chevy trucks stacked. And all they had to do was, they got the chip, they went over, lifted up under the wheel well, plugged it in, and then they can take that truck.
Yeah.
The south.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. 2 points. One, I think strategic tariffs make sense, like what you were saying that Canada did, right? They were protecting their industries, their national industries. Same thing as what they're doing right now. Canada has tariffs, and I think Trump has said like 200%. That's only on, I believe, dairy goods, which they have a dairy industry, and it has to hit a certain threshold of imports from any certain country, and it's just the U.S. really. So it hits a certain threshold of imports from the United States, then it'll hit that tariff because they're trying to protect their dairy industry, and we've never hit that. Right. So that 200% tariff has never come into play, but you hear those kind of things. So strategic stuff makes a lot of sense, for switchgear, for chips, for certain things. But, do we need tariffs on T-shirts? I mean, we get those from China. Are we going to have a bunch of manufacturing facilities doing tennis shoes and ballpoint pens or whatever we want to throw out there, or should we be strategic about semiconductors and energy, things like that? That's kind of makes sense to me.
It's a happy balance, Russ. I mean, you're not wrong. Um, it's it's a happy balance on where the tariffs come from and what industries maybe you're putting on, unless it's overall. The one thing that for China that they were including in what we were exporting to them was like software or services. So it wasn't like a hard product. And does that really protect our industries? We need more. We need more. One of our biggest deficits, and most people don't realize, is shipbuilding.
Yeah.
If we went to war today with China, they control some astronomical percentage of all the shipbuilding. We wouldn't be able to ship because we've shut down our shipbuilding, and they make most of the ships.
That's one of those strategic areas that make a lot of sense,
Right.
to do that. What doesn't make sense is across the board tariffs of whatever that percentage is, like Brazil, and that's a whole other story we could get into. But I mean, coffee. Why are we going to have the U.S. pay more for coffee and bananas and things that we can't produce here in the U.S. when that's money just going to the government? This is kind of the biggest tax hike in I don't know ever how long. Whenever you're looking at tariffs, I'm not saying we shouldn't do certain things. That makes a lot of sense. I think Trump's tariffs on China, his first term, okay, that made sense with what he was going after. But this is totally different. I feel. Do you think the goal is to get manufacturing back in the U.S.? Is that because we think of different goals that he's had?
I think it's more than what he's letting us on, but he's leading us into or telling us there's a bigger picture, I believe. And sometimes it's coming in heavy with the hopes of, hey, you're going to ask me for a 20% discount in the hopes of getting 10. So you push it further with the hopes of, okay, I can get them to negotiate downward. We're down here. We're going to ask for this. My goal is just to get it to here.
I understand that part as far as, we're gonna say 30% and we really are fine with 10, but should it be 10? Should there be things like, let's use Brazil as an example.
Right.
We have a trade surplus with Brazil, which trade deficits, I don't really buy that, right? I've got a trade deficit with my grocery store, right? I buy more from them than they buy from me, but that's fine. So having a trade deficit isn't a bad thing. The tariffs don't make sense in that regard. So like a Brazil, who we have a trade surplus with, does that make sense to have any type of tariff at all on a Brazil?
I can't talk to Brazil. I don't know. I saw it. I didn't know really what it was. It almost seemed like it was a political tariff.
Well, Brazil is a political one with his buddy who used to be president. They don't like how they're treating him, so I'll put that in the corruption bucket, right?
Potential, yeah.
Let's look at Canada for an example. So, all right, we have a trade deficit with Canada, but does that mean 35%? Because the reason he's saying we got a big tariff on Canada of 35%, last I heard, is because fentanyl coming in. They don't have hardly any fentanyl coming in. Any fentanyl is bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there should be a certain amount.
Fentanyl coming in than you would believe. Because we're cracking down on the Mexico cartel, the shift has been into Canada. And
You're saying they're circumventing coming through Canada.
they're not produced. The idea initially was to, hey, we'll ship it into Mexico. Mexico will produce it and then bring it into the US. It's it's not being shipped and manufactured as much as it was before in the Mexico. It's now in the Canada.
Canada, like 2024 was only 0.5%, I think, like 40 pounds or something that came over
It's gone
the
up.
Canadian border.
Start reading a little bit about it, and you would be surprised. They have figured out, like, hey, instead of trying to smuggle it into the US, they can go through Canada, but it's a lot easier to get it into. They've set up the labs and everything in Canada. And in most cases, they can just walk it across the border because there is no border.
Yeah, I looked. The numbers I saw from 2024, which are the latest numbers, was there was a little bit of fentanyl that came over from Canada, but it was like 0.5% of what's come into the U.S. overall. So I'll look. Maybe it's gone up since that, but my understanding is that was something Trump brought up, and the Canadian government said, "All right, we'll squeeze it down even more."
It,
So.
I in listen on another one. I'm a big Sean Ryan fan. That's where I heard it. And anytime I listen to the Sean Ryan, I usually go right back on and start researching, like, hey, how true was this? Because he has some conspiracy theorists on there. And so I love listening to that. But there was a lady that is tied into doing interviews with the cartel.
Hmm.
And she brought it up of, yeah, it's now coming through Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that more is coming in through Canada, and 35%, and with Mexico, where I think we agree that's where the bulk of it comes in, right? Is from Mexico. That's my point. Is all right. We're saying this stuff's coming in from Canada or wherever, but he's really penalizing Canada, and I think it's just there's 51st state and all those things that he's saying. So he's got this real, issue with Canada and then Mexico, where this stuff is really coming in from. The bulk of it is from Mexico. He's like, okay, yeah, we'll kick the can another 90 days for Mexico. It just, you see where I'm going with that. He's pointing to one problem, but the real problem is somewhere else. The big problem is somewhere else.
And it may be that he sees Mexico doesn't have the ability to fix the issue, but he sees Canada does. So it's like in your business, when you had electricians that were really good and you had electricians that were mediocre. If you had a big project, you pushed your good electricians on that harder project because you knew they could get it done. Very similar. Hey, Canada can actually get it done because there's less corruption in Canada tied to drug smuggling and cartels than there is in Mexico. And I'm just,
you could be right.
Back. And that may not be what he's thinking, but it may be, hey, I can push them harder and they're actually going to get something done. I'm going to have to play the long game with Mexico.
That could be it. But to use your analogy of we have a project and the different skill level and this of electricians, at the end of the day, it's still about getting the project done. So you put people where you need to and
100%.
position them. So if I look at the fentanyl problem, I'm not really getting the project done. The job is failing at the southern border. We may be doing really good up here on this part of the project, but at the end of the day, it's still not going to be a win.
Well, yeah, the tariffs may not be helping with Mexico, but securing the border sure has. The number of illegal crossings. I mean, that's game one, right? That you got to stop the illegal crossings. You stop the illegal crossings or reduce them, you're going to reduce the drug flow coming in too. because they're going to have to find a different way. And from what I was able to read is the cartel recognized that. So where isn't an issue getting in the US, and that's from Canada. So that's why the switch, there's been more coming in from Canada than previous, because we've slowed down the fentanyl coming in from Canada through our own measures, not through the assistance of the Mexican government.
That could be. I think the Mexican government's tried to step up. I think they put some. I'm not saying they fixed it by any means, but I'm saying I think there was some effort there from the tariffs and all this back in.
I don't
maybe as
believe
April
that
or
the
whatever.
Mexican, I don't believe the Mexican government is working to fix the issue.
And they may not be. I don't know, which would make me want to be hammering down more on them than who's supposed to be been a fantastic ally in Canada. It just I don't know. That's a whole other saga. But no, I hear what you're saying. It could be that's what his strategy is. Just the strategy seems to change all the time, depending on what's going on.
And that's the one thing that I feel keeps us and his opponents on their toes. I mean, his first term, everyone was afraid of what he would do. He didn't do anything. It was just that fear, like, never know what that guy's going to do.
Yeah.
So maybe moving back and forth, maybe it's a bad strategy, maybe it's a good strategy. But what we had before definitely was not working. The last administration.
Yeah, it definitely had its problems. It had a few good things, but there was definitely some struggles. I can't argue that one bit. Well, with the current administration, kind of looking forward, let's look. Tell me your thoughts of how they've done so far. If you could, give me a grade on them, how they've done so far, and are you optimistic? And would you support this kind of policy across the board on into 26 and beyond?
So I will start with saying most of what we look for in a president, and I think this goes across the country, and it's the right idea, but we look for role models. We look for our president to be a role model for our kids and to be something that we think is great. And in my opinion, we haven't had a role model that you could say from personal to professional to political is a true role model since Jimmy Carter. And I don't think Jimmy Carter was a great president. But the guy personally, in his personal life, tremendous guy. No one gave back more than that guy. And you can find flaws in every president since. And if that's what we're going to base it on first, who's doing the best job, then we're always going to be, there's going to be groups that just, no matter how good the person is or how bad the person does, they're going to love them or hate him or her. And I think we had people that looked at President Obama and it didn't matter what he did. There were some good things that he did. And there were some things that Clinton did that were good. And President Bush and President Trump. And I think that we get blinded by our personal feelings so much on one subject that we either overlook some of the issues or we overlook some of the good. So I think our current president can do a really good job. And I think that he's fixing issues that we have. Is he someone that I want my son to grow up to be like? Nope. He isn't. Okay. He has flaws. You know, he's arrogant.
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
He, you know, I'm not going to go into his personal life, but he's arrogant. He irritates people. I get it. But I think the last administration was so bad. The things that were going on have put us on a path that if we don't do something to correct, that we may never get back. And I think some of the things that our current president is doing is very severe, and it kind of shocks us. But I think in a lot of cases, we need that.
So overall, it sounds like you're in favor of where we're going currently as a country.
In general, you asked me the question of, am I a MAGA guy?
Yeah.
And I look at it and I said, hey, I'm a conservative Democrat, because there's a perception of MAGA by different people.
Sure.
And I don't know what your perception, like you say MAGA to some people and they think, hey, it's a racist.
Right.
But in my view, it's really an expression of resentment of our public institution, including our government, mainstream media, and our business leaders. Just don't like the direction that we've been going, and we need a correction. And it's about putting the American people first, and our nation first, our citizens first, over foreign countries. And I know and I believe a majority of us fall into that category.
Okay. No, that's fair. I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It really depends, like you said, on who you're talking to as far as what that definition is of MAGA, right?
yeah,
It means different things to different folks.
you've been to other countries. I've been to other countries. And listen, we have flaws. No matter who's in administration, what year it is, we always have flaws. But I can tell you, there is no better country to live in than the one we're in today. In most countries, we couldn't express. You and I could say something that the government doesn't approve of in the UK, and they're coming and getting us and arresting us.
Yeah.
Even in a country like the UK or in Europe, where we think that they're free. No one's free like us. You can tell me that, hey, I think, something that I feel is hate. You're free to say it, as long as you're not physically hurting me.
Yeah, I think that's a concern, is that freedom is seeming to be deteriorating. I'd say there's some evidence of that. Well, Craig, let's wrap up, man. We've had a really good conversation. I really appreciate it. Craig Heller, you're politically independent, you're brutally honest, and not afraid to talk the honest opinions you have. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you taking time for this. And
absolutely, Russ.
It was really good. I think this is evidence, I feel, of people who, because I don't think we agreed on everything, but
no, we did.
There were a lot of things that we did agree on, and we had a civil conversation and talked it out. Nobody got pissed off. There was no punches thrown. Everything is good.
And I believe most Americans are just like you and I. You don't agree on everything, but you can have a civil conversation.
Well said. And to our listeners, hey, if this conversation, if it made you think, if it maybe challenged some assumptions or even got under your skin just a little bit, hey, that's good. That's the point. So subscribe, leave a review, let us know what you think. Thanks for joining us here on Zero Distortion.